Welcome back, trainers, to the fantastic energy of the Malmo Pokemon TCG Regionals. My name's Amy Worsley. I'm here with Mike Ellis, and we are bringing you another riveting round of Pokemon trading card game.
I'm very excited, and also lots of amazing people here. We just saw Jack and Alessandro, very exciting.
We did! Some amazing players who are super friendly as well. If you see them around the hall, they're always up for a natter, so please go and say hi.
Also, we had the Schultz off. I think the most important Schultz is Lydia, who's lovely and working behind the scenes. Got voted best Schultz in the chat, you guys know.
Absolutely, you guys know.
But we did have a lot of fun watching that match. It was a bit of a tough one though, Guardy Mirror. A lot of it comes down to who gets set up early, but realistically, both of those guys are going to do well here at the event. But Robin getting a little bit of a head start.
Indeed, but it was interesting to find out that actually they hadn't tested that much at all. So
I mean, they're very smart, aren't they?
They are ever so clever. So they both relatively knew what the stakes were. They knew going into the game exactly what they were going to need to do in order to secure that victory. And yeah, Robin just got an absolutely explosive start in both games, really, in the end.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. We've seen Guardy doing very well so far, winning all the games on stream, also losing one, but that's sort of going to happen in the mirror. So Guardy right now is looking like one of the best decks in the tournament. Obviously, Tord popularized it at EUIC. It had a bit of play. A lot of weaker players taking it on, thinking, oh, I could just copy Tord's list and see how it goes, and then not doing so well.
We did see in the chat that Philip actually helped Tord with that list a lot, so it was interesting to see that he didn't manage to pull that back in that game. So it was really, really frustrating to see that the deck just wasn't playing well for them on that occasion.
I don't know if I should be able to say this will be fine. I saw Tord and Philip talking about the list, right? And I saw Tord rolling through Philip's list, and he went, we pretty much got the same conclusion here, just one card different. And they both went back and forth, and then the conclusion from both of them was, probably doesn't matter that much. It's like, it was a consistency card. You know, maybe one scenario would be better for one and the other scenario better for the other. And it's very similar there between the two brothers, right? One card different, pretty much, you know.
Yeah, one or two different, and that's it. And I think that's what it comes down to, is just, is the deck going to behave, or is it going to be a naughty little one on this game?
Speaking of how you build a deck, we had the chance to all come together and conclude what our deck choices would have been for this event. We all went with different archetypes. As you can see here, this is Amy's list. Do you want to talk us through your story of you and Gudra?
Oh, me and Gudra. Me and Gudra have had a funny relationship. I did originally net deck a Gudra list, played it in a few tournaments, and was victorious in those. And so I was surprised that I didn't really need any practice with this. It just sang to me. The deck knew we get along, we're pals. And so then I began to make tweaks to my play style, and I think that's really important when deck building. It's okay to go, I'm going to take Tord's list and then I'm going to edit it to the way I like to play. If a card is not resonating with you, don't feel like you have to play it. Don't push it into the list. It's not necessary. Take it out, replace it with something that makes you more comfortable, because the more you know your list, the better player you're going to be with it. So putting things in like the extra metal energy and the right hand for me felt better. I was more comfortable playing it a little bit like God of War, where I'm actively discarding energy early games so that I'm making sure I can always recur it later with either Melanie or Raihan. But having the flexibility to use water or metal energy in that is essential for me. So personally, the list just makes me more comfortable. It's a very clean-cut Gudra list, lots of switching options, Battle VIP, even Energy Recycler, just to make sure my options are always open. The only thing I lack is Pokemon recursion.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that and I go, as a Mew player, I like the look of that Drapion being the only one in there, and also no recovery. So maybe a little bit tougher into the Mew, but that's where you can start planning around, maybe getting that early cram hit to try and two-hit knockout. So there is some clever stuff in there. But yeah, very clean list. I do like your list. I think if I were to net deck a list right now, I'd be coming to you and asking for a quick little paste bin of what you got going there. But I think we'll have a little look at my Mew list now. Now, the thing about a Mew list is there's lots of different ways to play it, and everyone can add their own little flavor in. And I think, similar to you, I net decked a list. I think it was Pablo's list. Start there. I think a lot of people did so. And as a player who is not as consistent, I thought I'd try and make it as consistent as possible. So Fan of Waves changed into Cleansing Gloves, so kept the two-choice belt rather than go for the 1-1 split. Sort of acts in a similar plus 30 into the Lugia Arceus matchup. And then looking around, I think just a lot of playable cards, like trying to really focus on playable cards. So I cut down one of the paths because I found that if I had 4 pass, I'd often have multiple passes in the same hand, and it would get quite frustrating. And feather ball over nest ball. So just trying to make cards that are insta-playable, and the pennies in there just for the Genesect pickup against Sablezard. It can be really useful to
that's clever.
Stop the Sableye sprinkling. And it can also be a bit cheeky at the start. If you're struggling, you can penny up a Genesect to have another draw, but you know, very rarely does that happen. And the Serena as well, just one boss for a Serena helps with the early stage of the game.
That seems really clever. I've not seen a Mulist play many cleansing gloves, and the lack of Silene feels risky to me.
It can be. I always feel like in a Mulist, if you can try and play Judge every time or Roxanne later on every turn, that's the optimal way to do it, and then Boss or Serena to finish off the game. So for the most part, you're going to be looking to Judge or Roxanne. I always felt like Silene turns, I would have always rather judged, and better resource management of the things like power tablets early on would be favourable. And also, I'm not going to say I'm unlucky, but enough times you roll double tails on a Silene, it makes you think, I don't want this card in here anymore.
Yeah, you've got enough like dice rolls and coin flips with Cramomatics. Why add more stress, right?
Yeah, I think one heads with a Silene, you always feel like you've been lucky, and you're like, that shouldn't feel
Thank
lucky.
goodness.
That should be base level, what you're hoping for. But we do have a lot of fun with our decks, but really what we're here to do is we're here to look at the players at Malmo Regional. We are here with round 3 coming up soon. Had some amazing games so far, but round 3 is just getting ready there on the stage. As you can see, we're going to be looking at our next matchup. What do you feel about the tournament here today? There's quite a few players not here, aren't there?
There are a couple of key players not here today, but we have some really special players who are here, looking at the positives, who wouldn't usually maybe cross over to a European regional. So we're hopefully going to feature some of them today, and you guys will have some treats.
Yeah, I think of a few players everyone's probably wondering, when's Sander going to play? He's taken a miss. Stefan is also not here, but we do have the delightful and wonderful Sen going to be here. As you can see here, there are achievements. I love this, by the way. This is a wonderful graphic. I thought it was quite beautiful seeing Robin using the tool that he created to show his amazing achievements in that last game. But you see here, Sen, some big finishes there, top 8s across many regionals.
Yeah, loads, and honestly, really consistent with it too. These are on like a million miles away. These are all relatively recent accolades. So here we go. In with our next players, obviously Peter back again, with obviously Stuttgart, 2023 London EYC did well. Honestly, some fantastic finishes once again. It'll be an interesting match to see who's going to come out on top on this one, because they're both very strong players.
Yeah, I got a chance to chat with some of the Polish players when I was out at Warsaw, and they gave me the rundown on pronunciation, because as I said before, it's a bit of a struggle for me. And I think it's Piotr.
Piotr, I love that. That has a really lovely ring
nice
to it, doesn't it?
But we do look at the prizes here. Look at those energy recyclers.
Oh no! And 2 comfy. Oh, I don't feel good about that. I'm hoping that the bad feeling in the pit of my stomach on that one is just some early tournament nerves. We're starting off with Sen going first, though, for our first flower selecting.
So a bit of a lost box mirror here. We'll see how they vary in lists, but for now, going first, it can be a negative thing, this matchup, depending on if the Cramorant hit comes out and gets an early knockout.
Yeah, absolutely. Cramorant's huge in this sort of matchup, and until you know what your opponent's playing, sometimes it can be better to choose to go second if you're playing in a lost box mirror, which obviously in this meta, this day and age, it can be really risky choosing to go second. But if you have prior knowledge that you're going up against another lost box deck, then sometimes going second is optimal. Sen there going for a really thorough deck search. You could see that they were just poking their cards out the top there to count certain things. They're doing it again. This is really clever. I don't see this very often, where they're physically taking them kind of above the deck to check. I think that's a really lovely tournament tip for everyone out there if you're wanting to make sure that you have those key cards. I also see that Sen's done something really clever with their supporters, and they've kept their key supporters as full arts. I've done this in the past, and it's really key to being able to do a really quick deck search. So you can see their Chorus experiments really stand out, so they're able to just clock them straight away and know exactly how many are in the deck.
Yeah, there's clever little tricks like that. I think some people will chuck rainbow rares in to to help with that deck search. But I think in this case, the main deck search there, as you saw, were the energies and the supporters, recognizing one Psychic and a Raihan going to be in the prizes. The rest of the deck is pretty full of 4-ofs, isn't it?
Absolutely,
so you don't need to worry so much about those.
No, it's not too much of a concern, but they can see that they've got some of their 1-ofs in hand, so I'm sure that they've got a really good idea of their deck right now. Going straight on in with our first flower selecting, and there will be many flowers. This is going to be a beautiful flower field by the end of this match. Going for the Lost Vacuum. Ooh, not certain. It's a tough call, this one. You're either going to go for the energy off there we are, the Fog Crystal or another Comfey, or take the Lost Vacuum to increase your Lost Zone pace of play. And I think this was probably the correct decision, considering that they're going first and they're not able to Cold Res. Sometimes you can end up on the back foot playing a Beach Court. They'll be able to Lost Vacuum that soon and really increase the pace of their Lost Zone compared to Piotr.
Yeah, I think at this stage you don't need to rush too far ahead if you go first, because you do tend to get a few more in the Lost Zone just with those 2 early Comfeys. And we see here a switch out and a Comfey. So this is a tougher decision. Depends on how many switch outs are in hand currently, as to whether they want to think ahead to the next turn, or if getting another Comfey down will allow for that exaggerated push. But for now, just going to be careful with just the 2 and get rid of the Beach Court as well to affect the opponent. So that's 4 in the Lost Zone already.
Very impressive for a turn 1. Very, very impressive. 4 in the Lost Zone straight away. They've got Charizard in hand, Lost Vacuum I see. I think a Nest Ball was there. So they've got ways of getting Pokemon back. They can continue if they'd like to, or they can save their resources for later in the game. And that is the true show of a master of this game, is which resources that they're going to hold back. Radiant Charizard hits the bench, so we know there's no Greninja in this one, unlike their opponent. So we do have 2 very different builds. We can see straight off the bat that even the Radiant Pokemon of choice is very different.
Yeah, and that's the key with the Lost Box, is we typically bundle them together by the Charizard build or the Greninja build. And in this case, Greninja builds tend to have a favored matchup into the Charizard builds. As is the case with a lot of decks, it depends on who gets started well, who goes first. But with that turn 1 for the Charizard build, I think there is a chance that Sen could get a comfortable lead early on with a few Cramorant pokes and so on. And it's really relying right now on Piotr finding some early Lost Zone pressure to get that early Cramorant attack off.
Indeed. It's also interesting to note here that Sen does play the Manaphy, and Piotr does as well, but it's only relevant for one of them.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting as well, because knowing what's in the Charizard list is normally quite easy to tell, because it's quite a simple list. There's not a huge amount of room for change. It typically comes down to things like, do they play cross switches in there?
Yeah.
And those kinds of cards. Whereas with the Greninja build, there's so many variations of it, and particularly the energy of choice is going to be the key. So seeing that Metal Energy in the discard pile will reveal the Zamazenta will be an option, which... you know, there's all these different things you have to play around. Is there going to be a Kyogre? Is there going to be potentially some 2-prize attackers like Raikou, the Dragonite and the Drapion?
Yeah.
And so all of these things are going to be going through Sen's head right now.
Oh, and look at that. A beautiful board of flowers to get going with the Lost Zone on Piotr's side as well. But they haven't yet popped anything in there, I don't believe. I think we're still getting set up, which... you can see that really strong board state. Looks like we're definitely getting a Cramorant attack here on the Comfey. Yeah,
as long as that Colress comes through, that's going to be the key, I think. Trying to find a Colress through the next few flower selectings.
Oh, no, but more switch outs is not a bad thing. Is the escape route too risky, though, do you think?
Yeah, I guess the Charizard could get put into the active and take a hit from the Cramorant, so... does opt for, was that the switch card they took in the end there?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Because they do want to be knocking out some Comfeys with a Cramorant ideally. And we see the next one here, Zamazenta, not needed.
Off he goes. No Zamazenta this race.
Was it a switch out as well? Was that another switch card taken?
Looked like it, so they can keep on pushing. And 2 of the Lost Zones already quite impressive. Like, they just need that Colress. They didn't get it.
Oh no! My, and the energy recycler going means that all the energy recyclers are not accessible at this stage. Not too big an issue, as Kyogre will be an end of game attack, so hopefully we'll get it out of the prize cards, but that is huge here for Sen.
I really wanted to see that first cram, but no, it moves back over to Sen, and maybe it's really key who gets the first knockout in a Lost Zone matchup, so that must really have hurt.
100%. And that's why we're talking about going second could be a benefit. If you get the Cramorant attack off, it's a benefit. If you don't, then you're way further behind. So right now, Sen is in the driving seat, looking to take control of this matchup. Later on, the Sableye plus Holucha combination on Comphase will really get that acceleration going. Typically, the Greninja is a key factor in this matchup, being able to take out multiple Pokemon, but the Manaphy is down now, so Sen really setting up a rigid board state. Hugely,
yeah. They're making sure that they're battering their defenses, building everything up, not letting this opportunity go to waste.
Yeah, switch card or energy, knowing that one of the energies prized, might start thinking about energy at this point. In the discard pile is better than in the Lost Zone, but that is the first energy into the Lost Zone, so that's going to make potential future flower selectings tougher, especially if there is 2 energy, for example, in that. But a switch card and energy this time.
Oh my goodness. The deck is really not being kind to Sen here, putting multiple flower selecting psychic energy in front of them, and of course they go for the switch card. Don't want to be limited on Sableye later in the game.
Yeah, that was the same flower selecting in both of them, taking a different option both times, and you can see that's how that tree of decision making changes throughout a game based off of what you've already put in the Lost Zone. So energy really key to keep a hold of. And we see that Pokegear finding a Clara. That's not really what they want at this stage. They want to be looking to build out that Lost Zone as quickly as possible, get to the Sableye. So just a Clara now to thin out that deck.
Yeah, they've got a really difficult decision here. Their board state is so strong, but the build of their hand right now is questionable. Unfortunately, not able to use the Roxanne yet. The Clara is not particularly useful either. They've got the energy switch card, and choice belt. So unfortunately, only 2 of their cards are particularly relevant right now.
Yeah, so I guess the Cramorant will be able to attack here, so that's something at least. So we'll get a knockout, which is key.
Saving the switch card, which is interesting.
Yeah, I guess with the energy in the discard, that now activates Clara as a potential, I have to use this supporter this turn. But yeah, energy in the discard isn't always the worst thing in Lost Box, but yeah, as you can see there, that first knockout going in favor of Sen, and also the Lost Zone count being much more in favor of Sen at this stage. So now it's a chance for Piotr to start coming back.
Yeah, for sure. And here we go, straight to Piotr's turn for flower selecting number 1. That psychic energy really wants to be in people's flower selectings today. What is it with those Comfey? They're being so cheeky. And just, yeah, obviously have to put an energy in the Lost Zone. Lost Zone's a really interesting mechanic in a board state knowledge perspective too. Being able to see what your opponent is putting into the Lost Zone does give you a slight indication of how their turn is going or what their plan might be.
Yeah, and it increases the mechanical difficulty from a card game perspective of the Lost Box players. They have to think about 3 different things that are in their control: the Lost Zone, the discard, and their hand. Also what's in their deck, what's in play, abilities used. There's a lot more to think about. So Piotr right now is going to be managing all those resources carefully, and as you can see, Kyogre, Zamazenta, and the energy recyclers going into the Lost Zone, so really focusing around the Sableye route late game to try and start taking those knockouts.
It's curious to see these 2 decks, which have so many similarities, but yet so many differences, battle it out like this.
Oh, just the Crampoke into the Charizard. So no knockout here, but that will be able to be finished off by a Sableye later on. So damage on the board is good. And the Manaphy will also be a target for those Sableyes that open up Greninja. So there's all these kind of late game decisions, and that's where the Lost Zone box with a Greninja tends to be favored. Is once Sableyes are in play, Manaphy is quickly out of play, and then that's where you can start opening up those 1 or 2 turns where Greninja can be activated.
It can be really scary, those Greninjas taking multiple prizes, really showing how prominent they are in this matchup. I think it feels like Greninja is favored in this matchup, I believe. And it's interesting to note as well that the Cramorant didn't take the knockout on the Charizard because our Spit Innocently attack does not do weakness. That's the little text at the bottom there, that it is not affected by any weakness, so they cannot use that to KO Charizard.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, that that switch cut onto the Charizard could be relevant in the future, because that put that out of range of the 50 HP on Charizard and 70 HP on a Comfey or Manaphy, which would be great with the Sableye. So switch cut, another really important late game card in this matchup to start helping with the Sableye math. So again, stuff working in favor here for Sen. It's a favored matchup towards the Greninja variant, but still very winnable if things go well.
Yeah, the mathematics of these decks are really interesting, because you always got to remember that there's not only Sableye to deal with, but in Piotr's case, they're looking at the mathematics of Greninja knockouts too, so that when that Manaphy is off the board, can they take 2 knockouts reliably with the 90 damage from Moonlight Shuriken?
And what was interesting earlier with that poker gear, having to reveal the supporter, Sen is very obviously revealed, I have a Clara in my hand.
Yeah.
So if Piotr remembers that, he's going to know that by taking out that Manaphy, it's going to be coming straight back into play with a Clara. So that might be something to say for a Roxanne turn. So we'll see whether all of these kinds of things come together. And actually, speaking of Roxanne, it is there in Piotr's hand. So that could be a vital turn to take out the Manaphy and really start swinging it back in favor of the Greninja deck.
I think you're absolutely right. Those sorts of things are what make Lost Box players some of the brainiest of the bunch. They know that they've got to play every card meticulously to be able to take out an opponent so similar to themselves in the kind of what I call a micro mirror here.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the decks, but ultimately function very differently. And I think the big difference here as well is the consistency that the Greninja allows, having so much access to draw through discarding the energies and concealed cards. It can make it a bit more consistent. I think that factor in this particular game won't be relevant because Sen has been able to set up well, but it can be a factor outside of the Roxanne.
Yeah.
Because it just gives more outs to start getting out of that situation.
Hugely, and we consider that was this another flower selecting from Sen, deciding to stick with the escape rope. Having more and more switch options throughout the game is just going to help them just keep everything fluid. And Charizard does have a slightly high retreat cost, so that is something that they will have to battle with and consider throughout the game, is making sure that switch options are readily available. Whereas the Nest Ball at this point in time, probably not quite as useful to them. And maybe they have more consideration for basics later on with the Clara, being able to constantly bring things back. Yeah, they're not going to need to worry.
You're right about that switch out for Charizard, because the turn where Charizard attacks would potentially be a Roxanne turn now. And this is the whole thing. We've got to think about that comeback potential of Roxanne. So if a Charizard was to attack this turn, which is very unlikely, or in a future turn at the end game, then Roxanne follow-up would be scary. Could get locked in the active, can't attack during the next turn. So there's potential to swing back another turn, especially with Sableye. Doesn't need to worry about what's in the active, can just attack what's behind it.
It can go crazy. And here we see, is it the first Clara? It's the first Clara! Sen actually plays a slightly unusually high count of Clara for their deck. So I think that they are really heavily relying on that, knowing that they're just going to fish things back out of that discard pile relentlessly to put pressure on their opponents.
Yeah, getting that Cramorant back now will allow for another knockout with a comfortable active Pokemon. A Cramorant can stay there and keep swinging if needed. So we'll see whether that happens this turn. But again, looking at that lost zone, it is 8 in favor of Piotr and 7 for Sen. So a little bit behind on that. So Sableye is not active for either player yet, but could be relevant next turn as you see the Sableye in hand there for Sen. Got to debate whether to put it down now.
Who do you think is going to get there first?
It's got to be Piotr next turn, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think they're going to have it and we can start swinging with Sableye. So punching one might be quite scary, but I suppose Sen's probably expecting that Manaphy is going to be target numero uno.
100%. And I think the other question is thinning the deck right now. You see the Choice Belt in hand. Choice Belt could be relevant in this matchup, but at this point, Sen isn't sure whether there is something to worry about. Oh, that's a big jump right there. So that's huge.
Whoa.
Yeah, recognizing the Choice Belt is unlikely to be relevant here. Not to worry about any V Pokemon. Gets rid of the Choice Belt, lost zones it as well, putting it up to 9, gets that knockout, but now we get to see that Roxanne activation. Will it happen this turn? When will it happen? And what's Sen going to do to get out of it?
That was so spicy. It was so close to being 10 this turn. It could have happened. I think Sen was trying to push for it, but realized, no, it's not worth wasting my resources right now. We're just going to go with 9, knowing I can get 10 next turn. Ahead on prizes. Let's go.
But as we mentioned, no Sableye in play. So we'll need to get another flower selecting or a Colress next turn to increase that up. And this is the interesting point, and it's always the end game. Like early on, getting a few prizes is key with the Cramorant, but it's how you play out those final turns. We can start taking 2 prizes with Sableye or Greninja, or even, like we said, the disruption with Roxanne, how that's going to affect either player. So we're waiting now to see what Piotr goes for.
Oh, into a flower. Oh, he got the Colress off the flower select. What does he go for it though? Because there's another Comfey on bench.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
so
we took it. There's Colress. Loads of Mirage Gate in hand. My word, that is. He's going for the first one to thin the deck.
Okay, so there's no water in the deck right now.
Just metal.
Just metal. So that's going to allow for a retreat out.
And this might be the moment they realize that there's no energy recyclers.
That's concerning. No energy recyclers, so might need to play a Clara this turn just to be able to have enough energy. There is the Psychic in hand, so when they get to 10 in the lost zone, they will be able to use their Sableye anyway.
And there's a Clara as well in the prize cards. I feel like everything feels so stacked against Piotr, but they're doing fantastic nevertheless.
Yeah, so I wonder which supporter they'll use. They've got Colress, Clara and Roxanne in hand. I guess a lot of it will depend on this decision here, this escape ropes. If the Charizard goes into the active, then that allows for a Sableye with a uncomfortable active spot Pokemon. You can see Piotr's going into motor mode. They've got something in their head. They know what they're doing. There it is, the Roxanne. Sableye ready to attack next turn. A retreat on the Comfey, so 2 cards for Sen and a Charizard in the active that's going to be able to be Sableyed around. This is a huge swing turn for Piotr.
Absolutely huge. And, well, will Piotr even target the Charizard? Is it worth just leaving it there, thinking, yes, Sen might not have that switch. And if Charizard is stuck there, Combustion Blast cannot be used 2 turns in a row. So even if Sen attacks with Charizard, they won't be able to continuously take knockouts back-to-back if they cannot retreat it.
And if there is a knockout now, it's not going to put that Charizard in range of its ability Excited Heart. So the Combustion Blast will need multiple energy to attack. So Sen right now is a little bit stuck with that Charizard in the active, and that hand is Boss Sableye. So going to be relying heavily on that top deck.
Yeah, that isn't fun. I would not want that to be my hand right now.
So we see on the other side, the Manaphy not needed, as we mentioned. It's in both decks, but not relevant against Sablezard.
It's a good lost zonable choice. Hasn't come up in this match, but you never know for later. Piotr's checking that discard pile, very thin discard pile at the moment, to see what might come back and bite them if there's a Clara.
Yeah, so we look at that lost zone and we see 9 in it, so we think they must have thinned out a lot of their deck. But we've got to remember that a lot of that thinning was through lost vacuums.
Yeah.
So the deck is still very thick, and at this point, this top deck is huge, and it's a beach court, which isn't enough. That's not going to allow us to get out of the Charizard in the active, so we will see Sen really struggling here to do anything this turn, and it's going to swing very heavily in favor of Piotr.
Like trying for the boss stall, thinking, oh, I can see a lot of energy. There's some in the lost zone, there's some in the discard pile. No recursion has happened yet. Can I just stop them in their tracks the same way they're trying to do it to me?
Okay, so there is an escape rope. There's also, I think, a Metal Energy still in the deck, so being able to go for a Mirage Gate for a switch out is possible here.
Yeah, there's also, I think there was a switch cart in hand as well. I think they've actually got quite a few options. They've managed to really do well at keeping all of their resources light.
And then there's the Clara as well. We mentioned Clara going to be key to get that energy back, because energy recyclers are in the prizes and 1 in the lost zone. So the only way to get energy back out the discard pile will be that Clara. So we'll see that being played right here.
Yep.
What's he going to go for? And it's also the attackers as well.
Yeah.
We mentioned the Kyogre and Zamazenta not really using this matchup. They're in the lost zone. So they're going to be relying on Cramorants and Sableyes to keep attacking through this matchup.
I'm hoping that we will see a big comeback here, and I think that's what Piotr's deck specializes in, with the multiple Pokemon that can take multiple prize cards, whereas the Radiant Charizard build is there for the tankier decks, stuff that's going to have loads of big Pokemon that you can take out late game for that turn around.
100%, and as we mentioned, the Charizard is a liability when in the active spot, and that's what we're seeing right now. As Sableye is just going to keep putting damage on the board, and that's going to take out both Comfey, I believe.
No, and a little on Cram. Lost Zone mathematicians are absolutely insane. I don't know how they keep up. Doing 9 rounds of this, and there is the game.
It all swung so quickly. We said how great the start was for Sen, everything looking in his favor, and then that Roxanne turn really spun the game around. Everything going back in favor of the Greninja build of Lost Zone Box by Piotr there. We did say beforehand it is a slightly favored matchup into that build, but you never know. Like, the early turns for Piotr weren't great. Didn't get an early attack off, but still was able to come back at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key differences between that mirror match, is that we do get to see Lost Zone at its finest, swinging the game around and bringing it back. And you were right, that Roxanne turn was perfection, and they held it until the right moment when that Charizard was stuck, knowing that the differences between their decks are their greatest strengths, but also their greatest weaknesses.
Exactly. I think I wonder if, in hindsight, Sen putting the Charizard into the active was the mistake there. Maybe giving up a Convey and accepting that the engine was going to go might have been more important, because at least then there would have been one more Convey to attack with, but or to use the ability with. So we'll see. In hindsight, it's easy to say that, but I think it was just a really unfavorable position for Sen. We mentioned how good it was getting to that 10 in the Lost Zone, but without clearing out the decks, it's not so great. What do we see here?
We see some little twinsies. We got some brothers. They're here. They're not pleased to see one another in the active. Neither of them want this, but, you know, I've seen a scratch for 20 in my day.
I mean, they're very much, they're not a bad start, but they're not ideal because it does force you to use a switch out early on. So that is going to be an early Convey, getting more switch outs and looking to really motor through that Lost Zone. But yeah, Sableye start is it's not optimal.
No, and I think that's the key, is that you're burning a resource really early just to get it out of the active to get your Lost Zone on the grind, really. But both players started it. So again, once again, the biggest strengths can become the biggest weaknesses of the deck. And maybe now we will see that early attack and whether it's prominent.
And both these decks play so many consistency cards in trainer form, the ball search outs, the switch outs. So typically when you start with the wrong Pokemon, most of the time in a Lost Engine you're able to get out of it. It's not always the case. We've seen plenty of Kyogres in the active or Drapions in the active turn pass.
Yes.
But on this occasion, both players able to get straight into the Conveys and begin those flower selectings.
And how key it is that they were both able to, otherwise we might have had rather short game 2. But instead, we get to see the Lost Zone at its finest, bringing it all back. Fire energy hitting the bin. There's only a couple of those in deck, so now it's important to keep those resources flowing so that Charizard might be able to do its thing, but maybe we won't see Charizard as much this game.
Yeah, it was between Fire Energy and a Holucha, and it's so key to have the Holucha in this matchup because it will swing a turn where you can get 10 damage onto Convey and then Sableye, get both of those out of play. But the Fire Energy, there is only 2 in the deck, so at this point Sen has been made aware of the counts of energy, similar to last game, 1 Psychic Energy in the prize cards. There is only 4 Psychic, 2 Fire, so having to be careful with those resources.
Yeah, we see there's a huge energy split between the 2 decks, so you can see that they are really working entirely differently. They both have different methods to the madness as such, and it's awesome to see that they're both keeping up with one another, although they're built entirely differently.
Yeah, and it's 12 energy in the Greninja build and only 6 in the Sablezard build.
Literally double.
Literally double. I mean, that does open up room for the Sablezard to have things like cross switches, so it does have an advantage having less energy, but it does mean in those flower selectings you have to be very careful with the energy, especially early on, because it can affect you later on when you get a very tough decision between energy and something very, very important.
Yeah, and then like we saw in game 1, that Charizard getting stuck in the active, but I'm curious, I don't remember, did Sen show off that Holucha in game 1? This could really turn the tides.
It could, and these players will be aware of what kind of options will be open, and I think the biggest scary factor will be which one of them can get set up quickly, because as we saw in the first match, the other fun stuff that we see in the Greninja list didn't really get used. Kyogre going straight into the Lost Zone, Zamazenta not worthwhile having in play because it's too risky. So both players will be looking to go down the same route to attack with the Cram and the and the Sableye. But as you mentioned, the Hawlucha will swing it in favor of the Sableye damage at some point during this match.
Yeah, so maybe Sen's not too worried about Piotr just having taken the first knockout with the Cramorant, which seemed on the horizon, so it's understandable. But I don't think they're probably too concerned about it right now.
It's the swing turns later on that are the key. Those 2 prize turns. And I think right now, Manaphy is so key for Sen. He needs to get it into play because that Greninja could be active next turn.
It's looming.
And not much in terms of the hand, not much in terms of Sen's game state. So he's going to have to start building something out here. Otherwise, it could get quite risky real quick.
Sen just took the Echoing Horn, which I think is a really interesting play. Instead of going for Sableye, limiting that option. They do play plenty of them, but Echoing Horn is a one-off in their list. They're looking to disrupt their opponent by putting something ill-preferable or something they can Sableye later onto the bench.
Okay, so the Beach Court has to go into the Lost Zone there because another Comfey is needed. Chorus Experiment is key off of this next Comfey because finding depth in that deck was the struggle in that first match for Sen, not able to work through a lot of the deck. And is that another Comfey, but not a way to switch into it?
Yeah.
So this is going to be another turn where Sen is not getting attack off, making it very unfavorable for him. You can see by that facial expression, he is not happy with how this is going.
Not at all. Although their board is quite strong for continuing their Lost Zone, their switching options are dead in their hand now. They've got absolutely nothing. And Charizard, once again, is there clogging it. But maybe they just feel it's too risky to put it down.
Yeah, Charizard, Echoing Horn, Roxanne, all cards that you don't want to be seeing early on. You want to be seeing those Cramorants, those Chorus Experiments, the things that get your Lost Zone going and get attacks off early. And that's exactly what Piotr has managed to do with that first Cramorant attack and will continue to do so for the rest of the game.
Indeed, and it looks like we might see a Greninja this turn, in which case Piotr's going to run away with this race. It could really start to put the pressure on Sen if they are able to get the Mirage Gates. Now we might see it. There's the 7. So the Mirage Gates are live and they've, oh my goodness, their hand is plentiful.
They have 2 Mirage Gate there as well. So even being able to create a switch out through an energy will be key.
As long as they've got enough energy. Ooh.
I didn't see a second water, but there might be one in there. We'll see off the next Mirage Gate, but one on the Greninja here, and then one onto that active Comfey will allow for a switch. There might even be a switch out in hand, but a Greninja attack now will be devastating, but it would activate the Roxanne, but I'm sure at this point, Sens were thinking way more about the prize cards in play.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so there is a second water in hand. They just need to switch into the Greninja now, and once they've got that in hand, oh, can they do it?
Well, they've got the Mirage Gate to do it, but I assume they don't want to use that at this stage. I'd rather use another form of switch outs. I didn't see one in there. Maybe an escape rope would be fine at this stage.
Oh,
yeah,
switch cart. Yay!
Plenty in there, plenty in there.
Oh, and we see the Moonlight Shuriken. Goodbye to Comfey limiting the Lost Zone, but also taking Sen down to 1 Pokemon in play. Oh.
At least he's having a chuckle about it. And at this stage, this is the difference between the 2 Radiants. As we mentioned, Greninja, much more favorable in this matchup as an attacker. The Charizard, preferred for those big V Pokemon to take out, trading favorably with a 1-prizer into a 2-prizer. But here, it is not going to be adding any value. And this is where the cloggers starts to happen in Sen's hand.
Yeah, Sen had clearly got ready for this matchup. The Hawlucha is a sign that they had absolutely considered this, but unfortunately it's not gone their way right now. They can still swing it back, but it's going to be a tough cookie to crack at this stage with 3 prizes to the opposition.
It's not just that, it's the Lost Zone is looking strong for Piotr here. The game in favor for Piotr, but the Roxanne does come out.
Let's see
this
how we
is
go.
Where, you know, there's always a chance with the Roxanne. Two cards can lead to nothing.
Yeah, so we'll see. You never know. It happened last game, it can happen again. Stranger things have happened.
I mean, if this comeback here happens from Sen, this will be the single greatest comeback I've seen in a Lost Box mirror of sort. And Roxanne can do that, but there's so many ways out of Roxanne for Piotr's list. It's so full of consistency cards. And we see there a Sableye and an Energy Recycler, so very much in favor of Sen.
Sen's got a lovely hand there, and you know what? I'm going to say it. I believe in the comeback.
I mean, I have 0 faith, so You can take all that energy.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm taking this on board. This is my burden to bear now.
Your hope will very likely lead to heartbreak, and I'm not ready to break my heart this early on in the day here at Malmo. As we see Sen just playing out as much as possible, needs to thin out that deck in case the Roxanne comes back his way later on, and will set himself up. He needs an attacker still even.
Yeah, that's very, very true, but they will be able to continue to build their Lost Zone up. This turn, at least, there'll be some more comfy action. There's both of them gone, 2 cross switches, so that is 1 whole cross switcher combo in the Lost Zone now, but they still have the accessibility of 2 for later. Colress is in hand, so next turn they should be pretty solid, readily available with those Sableyes. However, one had to go in the Lost Zone earlier, I believe, and one's in prize cards, so finding that third one could be a stretch.
I hate to break your heart so early on in this comeback, but there is a beach court in play. All of the Pokemon on Pyotr's side have 1 retreat cost, so they can easily retreat into a Comfey or a Cramorant and just attack. So you're not best favoured right now.
No.
It's very much still in Pyotr's favour, but that's what we said. Like, the Roxanne is only so good, but the board state is so well developed for Pyotr that the chances are, as we see here, just going to keep attacking.
It's very simple, though. The Cramorant has the ability to do that, and that's the beauty of it, right? Attacking for free? How many options do we get to do that?
Yeah, not many Pokemon can attack for free, and having just one sat on the board ready to attack it on a whim is so key, especially with 70 HP Pokemon being the only thing in play for Sen. Doesn't want to start putting Charizard in play because what happened last game happened.
Well, exactly, and I suppose that's the fear. Although I don't know if Charizard's back in the deck now, so we'll see how this Colress goes, but it's not looking good.
I mean, there's a Charizard, a choice belt.
Well, the belt can go in the Lost Zone at least. We know that's not necessary, but... Oh, and then a vacuum...
I mean, it's still a whole load of
switches. It's not
a whole load of rubbish, isn't it?
A whole lot of nothing, unfortunately. Yeah, and with no more Comfey to be able to continue flower selecting, apart from the singular one in the active spot, Charizard goes into the Lost Zone this time. Sorry, buddy. Bye.
I mean, this is the stage where if this wasn't match point, then I'm almost certain Sen would have scooped by now to try and get another game in. But it is just because we're in that position where it's always worth playing out. There is always a chance.
Sen's got to fight tooth and nail for this.
Yeah, he has to fight it out to try and get to the end of this game. And so he's currently in a position where very few options, just has to hope for the best and hope that something goes wrong for Pyotr. Maybe... I mean, honestly, I can't see a way out of this. I don't know why I'm trying to pretend there is one.
Well,
but at this point, you have to play it out. There's no other reason not to.
No, absolutely, you've got to. And if the Roxanne has done its job, Pyotr might not be able to retreat the Comfey in the active. So I suppose that's the hope going in with that escape rope, is protect his Comfey. 12 in the Lost Zone, Sabley's active, but we do know that Pyotr's got 1 energy in hand. So sadly, Manaphy's probably going down regardless this turn because they can just use the Cramorant. But starting off with a strong turn already. And again, they're not taking anything for granted. I think that's really key. Pyotr can see they're in a really commanding position, yet they're still going to play out this turn as if they could lose next.
Yeah, I think the Comfey being pushed into the active was a big sign for Sen that there is something in Pyotr's hand that could retreat. Otherwise, he would have probably just gone for the Greninja to guarantee the retreat into the Cramorant and not be greedy trying to dig too deep. That's the advantage with this board state is plenty in favor of just continually attacking with the Cramorant. The only Pokemon in Sen's list that can survive a Cram hit is that Charizard. Everything else lower than 110 hit points. So Cramorant, a very strong attacker here for Pyotr, and might even close out the whole game.
And sadly, even if Sen goes and gets that Sableye in play at this stage, they're going to have to use 110, so 11 of those damage counters on the Cramorant alone, leaving 1 sad damage counter to place somewhere else.
I can see your heart breaking, Amy. You believed. I'm not sure why you believe. I mean, someone had to. Someone had to believe. And I'm sure Sen will be sitting here going, look, that first game was so close. That had to be the win because it was such good setup at the start, a little bit in favor. It's just this matchup is incredibly difficult for the Sableye Charizard build, which is more designed for the rest of the field and not for this Lost Zone box with the Greninja.
No, it very much goes to prove that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Charizard was a big boy to deal with, but unfortunately for the Greninja build. They don't really care. They ignore it. They can work around it. In fact, they'll make it a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you put a big Pokemon in the active and let it stay there and just play around it, that can sometimes be the best strategy, as we saw in the last game. But there might be an attack here. Now, one thing I've learned from Tord, whenever I've played him a few times in Cube, and he doesn't care if he wins or loses. He cares if he gets a knockout and makes sure he doesn't lose by 6 prizes. And that'll be what happens here. Sen getting a prize card, not going to be swept with 6 prizes to 0. But this turn here is likely to be the turn where Piotr takes it all.
But there's no Cramorant, so we'll see. I have hope. There is yet something that could happen.
Your heartbreak is just going to be worse at this point, Amy.
I believe it's fine. There's no attacker on board. Piotr can't attack right now. There's no attacker on board. They can't do anything. The flower selecting might have to be the one. They might get away with it yet. How many prize cards can Sen take?
I mean, at this point, you're right. There's not going to be an attack off here, but Sen has a very big mountain right now in front of him to climb up. That's going to be a long journey back into this game, but as we mentioned, may as well give it a go. There's nothing to lose at this point.
No, absolutely nothing to lose, so all guns are blazing. We've got this.
So all those energy going back in. The Psychic energy would open up a Sableye attack. Another energy would open up a retreat out, so off the flower selecting, lots of options through those energies being put in. But as we mentioned, Piotr has to play this smart. He can't skip any steps, because if he skips a step, it could lead to inconsistency in the flower selecting, leading to another turn in favor of Sen. So this is where that experience comes in, just continuing to play in top gear right now.
Absolutely. You might think you've won it all, but until you've taken that final prize card, you need to play your very best. At these events, everyone is playing for the win. There are such high stakes. We're coming to the end of the season. They absolutely need this of the flower selecting. It's an energy and a nest balls. They take the energy into hand, but it still isn't enough because Sableye is not live.
There we go. And is that a Poker Gear there?
Looks like it.
A nest ball as well, so you can thin the deck of Pokemon potentially here if there's a Cramorant available, which I'm not sure there is, because I think there's one in the discard, maybe one in the lost zone. I can't remember, but there is no Cramorant in deck.
Yeah, looks like there's one in the lost zone there. So they've only got one to work with. Kyogre and Cramorant both looking like they're in the lost zone there. So attackers are slightly limited at the moment. They might not get an attack off this turn.
So this could be for a Clara or a Colress Experiment at this stage to open up options. So we see there a Colress Experiment off of that Poker Gear. It's why it's so good in this deck, because those supporters are so key on those right turns.
Sableye could be live now this turn, so looks like an attack can happen if there is a switch option available as well as an energy.
Okay, so Colress Experiment for 5. 3 will be taken.
Can this be game? Have we got it? Is the winning hand about to be constructed
right
in front of our eyes?
For the Sableye.
I believe that's it.
That's it, right?
That is it. We've got it.
As long as the energy's in there, which it should be from the energy recycler. So Water on the active for the switch, Psychic on the Sableye for the damage.
Oh,
and there we go.
It's all over.
Sen fought valiantly there, but unfortunately the unfavored matchup does go against him, and Piotr will come out on top. Lost Zone box with Greninja, strong into the Charizard. Water beats fire on this occasion, and Piotr carries on 3-0 here at Malmo.
We'll have to see which deck over the course of the weekend ends up on the top spot. Is it going to be Charizard or is it going to be Greninja? Who is the superior Radiant Pokemon?
Yeah, I mean, the Greninja deck has a lot more flexibility as well, so we'll see what the variations are there. I know Kyogre is very popular right now.
Yes, very much so.
Out, and it also means you can take out a dark-type attacker to favour yourself into the Mew matchup, because Kyogre can finish off the Genesect. So there's lots of benefits to that Kyogre.
There are loads, and it really makes the Lugia matchup better as well. So if we want to go ahead and put Serena, Radiant Serena, in the Radiant race this weekend, and we'll see which one.
It's like your only grass-type Pokemon that you can lean on. You really want to see.
I will lean on any grass-type Pokemon, but all I've got at the moment is Radiant Serena, so I will take it.
So here at Malmo, as I've mentioned many times here, 9 rounds today. And what is important when you have 9 rounds of Pokemon is there is a lunch break at some point during it. So after 3 rounds here, we'll be having a lunch break with the players. But don't worry, we don't go away. You guys can stay here, continue watching the stream. We'll have loads of content for you throughout. And I'm going to ask you, while you're at a tournament, what's the key making sure you go get food or making sure you get a fresh air and a break? What's the priority for you if you're in a tournament?
Honestly, I would prioritize both. I'm going to go in on that one. I would pack a lunch, go outside, have a good breath of fresh air, sit outside and eat your lunch if the weather permits, because I think they're both really important. It's so easy to get a headache or not feel your best when you're in a hall like this. There's lots of people, there's lots of pressure, everyone's chattering away, it's very loud, and I think just having that moment of calm and peace is really important for our wellness. So stay well, Pokemon players, hydrate, have some grub, and try and grab a breath of fresh air if you can, because it's imperative that we are all healthy and feeling our best at events.
My biggest problem is I'm a greedent personified, so I go out there and I eat far too much food, and I come back in all sluggish, like, how do I play this game? So you do have to be careful what you eat.
Oh, you don't food comatose yourself.
No, I sometimes can't help myself. I see food, I eat food. As I said, greedent personified, can't help it. So what we'll be doing, I think, during our lunch break is we'll be having a bit of fun here.
We're going to have so much fun, you guys. We have treats.
I think we're going to be doing some GLC, right?
Oh, I hope so. We've brought plenty of decks with us, so we should be good. So hopefully we'll see some caster action playing some GLC in the break today. So make sure you stick around, grab your lunch, bring it to your desk, wherever you're sat watching the footage today. Literally don't go anywhere. You're going to have, I'll give you 5 seconds to go grab some lunch.
And when you're back,
then we're going to carry on with everything. You're not going to go anywhere. You're going to make sure that you're sat at your desk or wherever you're watching the footage today. You're not going to miss a thing because you're going to want to see everything.
So with that, I think we'll go quickly grab a snack before we come back and do some GLC for you guys at home. So make sure you're ready for the best game of Pokemon.
Lost Zone Box, despite losing Scoop Up Net, is still a massive threat in this format. Corvus's Experiment and Comfey allow you to get cards in the Lost Zone fast. Comfey, when it's in the active, can use its flower selecting ability, which lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. One goes into your hand and one goes in the Lost Zone. This, in combination with many switching cards, allows you to grow your hand and grow the Lost Zone extremely fast. Corvus's Experiment is a supporter card, which lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Then you get to keep 3 and put 2 in the Lost Zone. This opens up the door for cards like Cramorant to attack for free, Mirage Gates, which allow you to accelerate 2 energies from the deck, and Sableye, which will allow you to place 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. For 1 energy! Honestly, it gets a little bit silly. This makes Lost Zone box decks extremely versatile, and they can even make use of Radiant Greninja's attack, Moonlight Shuriken, to Grief Evolution decks, or go extremely aggressive in the active position with Radiant Charizard's Combustion Blast attack. Cards like Snorlax and Zamazenta can also be used in Lost Zone box to add extra offensive pressure also. No matter what happens, Lost Zone box will be a top tier contender, and it's something that quite honestly you have to keep your eye on as a player. Another thing I want you to keep your eye on though is this stream, so don't go anywhere, next round coming up soon.
Good morning, Pokemon trainers, and welcome back to our live coverage here at the Malmo Regional Championships. I've got an absolute treat for you now. We've got our winner of our last round, Piotr. Piotr, you're now 3-0. You're going into round 4 with an EXO record. It's something that not many players will be at right now. How are you feeling?
Pretty good. There's still a long day before me, so yeah, I hope it will go well for the rest of rounds.
Sure. Now, you had obviously tested that deck. You played it masterfully. You knew what you were doing, the flower selecting, the flower selecting options and all of the nitty-gritty actions that you have to take. It's careful deliberation. How much testing did you do before this regional?
I played this deck since the rotation. I use it also at the UIC. In total in this format, including league challenges and league cups, I think I played around 150 games of this deck. That much.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Lost Box is such a popular deck right now. It's one of the top 3 decks, as we like to call it, with Mew and Suicune. Yeah. Now, the mirror matches. For a lot of trainers back home, it's so daunting, the mirror match. Single prizes, it's all those little micro decisions, as I said earlier. Now, your game 1, the decision to play the Roxanne was so impactful to the end result. But what is your secret to the Lost Box mirror? Because a lot of players just, they have these own little ideas of what it is.
Yeah, so I usually choose to go second in Lost Box Mirror, like most people, I think. And the day before tournament, I was thinking about one card, either consistency or one more tech for mirror, because I knew it will be popular, but I chose consistency. But I think it will be a better decision overall. And so Roxanne is very powerful in the mirror, as you said, especially in this game against Sen when he had very slow start. We had problems in Call Rush, game 1. And so just use Sableye as much as possible. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the insight. It's always helpful for the trainers back home, and even me, as well. But we said Mew, Lugia, they're the streets on the kids on the block. Let's say they're the big decks. You come into the regional, you have to have that way to beat them. So let's say Mew, Lugia. What is your? We know that you're playing Kyogre. Is that the one out, or how do you go around those matchups?
Kyogre is very important in both of the matchups you just said. I feel pretty confident against Mew, because after you KO the first Genesect, you stay at 4 prizes until they take them at once. If you have like a faster setup, you can do this with Sableye and Greninja, but often the Kyogre is the finisher. So they never Roxanne when you never go down to 3 prizes, which is pretty good. And Lugia is sometimes scary because the Tyranitar can mill your Kyogre or Mirage Gate on Recycler. So in this matchup you have to be even more careful with all the resources, because they can be gone much faster.
Now, Lost Box, just one of our last questions with you, now that we got you here. We hear that Lost Box, if you want to play it consistently, you play the Zard version. You play the Charizard version. That's what we usually hear with a lot of the Pokegears, the cross switches and stuff like that. But Kyogre is the deck of choice that you've made. Now, why Kyogre? Why the Kyogre variant?
I think Greninja adds a lot of consistency as well, and is so. I wouldn't say that Sablezard is much more consistent. It's consistent in a little bit different way, but Kyogre is such a powerful card. Doing 250 to 2 of opponents' Pokemon is a very strong finisher, and Lost City isn't that scary like in Arceus Duraludon matchup, because if your Zard is gone in Sablezard, you cannot do much damage. And with Kyogre, it's very strong finisher that can take 4 prizes in 1 turn, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. What are your? Let's go into the negative side. What are your scary matchups? I feel pretty good with my matchup spread, but I don't have Drapion or Moltres, so. If Guardy Mewtwo V Union sets up the V Union, it usually can take 4 prizes if I don't win immediately. So maybe that's a little bit scary, but I didn't play much against this matchup. And of course, all these Arceus with heavy Puff, heavy Judge is also tough, because you can just not draw well after they Puff and Judge you. So. No problem. Well, thank you so much, Piotr, and we all root for you now going into the 4th round and the rest of your day. Thank you so much for giving your insight and your time. But for now, let's go to a little break, and we'll be right back with the action here at Malmo.
Thank you.